One of the most exciting aspects of studying Western esotericism is just how much there is to do, to discover, to explore, and to make accessible to the wider public. The field is shockingly new, and in so many ways, we've just scratched the surface of what history has to teach us about magic, mysticism, Hermetic philosophy, alchemy, Kabbalah, and on and on. This is even true for well known figures like Cornelius Agrippa, the author of the famed three books on occult philosophy. Now, I recently had the distinct honor of teaching a 14 part, 16-part seminar on just that occult philosophy. But one of the more daunting aspects of preparing that seminar was knowing that key texts of Agrippa's mystical philosophy weren't yet translated into English. They weren't translated at all. There weren't even modern editions of them. And to prepare the lectures, I found myself literally reading Agrippa in digital copies or in my own copies of the Opera Omnia, and I was simply sight translating his text from my copy originally printed around 1600 or from the very rare first edition printed in July of 1533. There just weren't modern editions, much less translations to work from as I was preparing for the seminar. But what became obvious to me in the preparation of just those lectures was that Agrippa's mystical thought was much, much more expansive than just the well-known three books on occult philosophy or his skeptical attack of the 1520s. Agrippa had composed deeply mystical and hermetic texts, especially during his time in Italy, and those texts were not available in English at all. Further, Agrippa also included an important epilogue to conclude his famed three books on occult philosophy that does not appear in either the standard critical edition nor in the recent English translations. Thus, not only were important texts lacking modern edition and translation, even Agrippa's most famous work on occultism lacked the ending that either Agrippa or the Inquisition or both saw fit to conclude that very important text. Texts that perhaps reveal, in fact, Agrippa's mature attitude on the topic of magic itself. And further, as I worked on my sight translations for the lectures, it became pretty obvious to me that Agrippa's Italian works were deeply Hermetic in character, among the most sincere expressions of the Hermetic philosophy during the latter Renaissance. It became obvious to me that these texts deserved a wider audience. Well, lucky for me, I just so happened to be friends and colleagues with one of the foremost translators of Latin Hermetica, Dr. Dan Atrell, the modern Hermeticist here on YouTube. And while my Latin is pretty good, I'm not a trained Latinist. And Dan is truly an expert in this field. So I shopped the idea to him. Let's make these texts available. But there was a huge problem in the way. Academic publishing. Now, to be clear, what follows here are just my opinions and no one else's. They're not Dan's opinions, to be sure. I'm totally speaking just for myself here. Academia is profoundly broken, and academic publishing is a scam. By scam, I mean academic publishers basically don't pay authors, they don't pay peer reviewers, they charge extortive rates for their books, which are priced for institutional purchases, meaning your tax dollars are buying them at hyperinflated prices. All of which means substantial profits for corporate shareholders, often attached to university presses. The same universities that have endowments larger than the GDPs of some countries. Your tax dollars are buying books for libraries at jacked up prices to support already rich universities. Academic publishers often charge hundreds of dollars for a single book, and thus they function objectively as intellectual cartels and gatekeepers of the world's wisdom. It's shameful and morally outrageous as far as I'm concerned. Well, I'm not about that. Esoterica is not about that. I'm about making my content as accessible as I can because every human being deserves an education as a birthright. Wisdom is a human right. So when I pitched the idea of publishing this bit of Agrippa to Dan, I suggested that we forego academic publishing all together. Let's keep all the scholarly standards that deeply matter to me and to Dan, and let's publish our work with a commitment to accessibility. And here it is. Here's Dan's wonderful translation of Agrippa's works, some of which have never appeared in English, with facing Latin. The Latin is included, a modern edition of the Latin is there, extensive footnotes, an introduction to Agrippa's mysticism that's written by me, and a totally updated bibliography on Agrippa studies in English. It's a couple hundred plus pages of real scholarship for $25 in paperback. And I'm pretty proud, I have to be honest, of what we managed to accomplish in just a few months. Now, is this a perfect solution for the predatory practices of academic publishing? No, it's not. I'll tell you, this thing is not peer-reviewed, and that's objectively not for the best. But we've included a totally new Latin edition of the text so that anybody with those language chops, well, you can keep us honest. Again, I'm not going to pretend that this is something like a solution to the evils of the academy and its excesses in academic publishing, but I feel passionate about education. I feel passionate about scholarship, and I feel passionate about the accessibility of wisdom that's been actively repressed for centuries. First by inquisitors, and now by academic cartels and their extortion through high publishing prices and the lifelong shackles of debt that come along with university educations. So I'm pretty proud of this little volume, and I hope you'll pick up a copy. We've tried to price it as reasonable as we can, given just how much work went into this. And as you can imagine, a lot of work went into this. But Dan and I are hopeful that this will contribute something meaningful to the expanding field of Western esotericism in a way that balances both scholarly rigor with wider accessibility. It's not a perfect solution, because there's not a perfect solution. But I'm also not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So if you're a fan of Agrippa, Hermetic and occult philosophy, or just Western esotericism in general, I hope you'll pick up a copy of our new book of translating some of this Agrippa material for the first time into English. You can find the links below to buy a copy of the book. And lastly, I just want to express my sincere thanks for all the support that I get here on the channel and for everybody that sat through and watched. Again, it's amazing to have the idea that thousands of people out there watched an entire seminar on Henricus Cornelius Agrippa's occult philosophy. For everyone that watched even a single lecture, thank you so much. Until next time, I'm Dr. Justin Sledge, and thank you for watching Esoterica, where we explore the arcane in history, philosophy, and religion.